Again, we're going to be working our way through Isaiah chapter 48, verses 6 through 13. But before we can do that, we must do what we always do. Back up, discuss what we talked about last week so that we keep everything in its proper context. Now, last week, we made our way through chapter 48, verses 1 through 5. And it's here that the prophet Isaiah is speaking to the people of the southern kingdom. And he's prophesying of the time in which they will be enslaved to Babylon. Now, why were they enslaved to Babylon? For their rebellion against God. They made a mockery of God's commands by not obeying them. They laughed at his ceremonial laws by bringing in false gods to the very land that God gave his people. So God is going to bring up this pagan empire by the name of Babylon to bring destruction to the land of the southern kingdom and to enslave God's very own people. And Isaiah prophesied all this years in advance. And yet the southern kingdom paid absolutely no mind to his prophetic words. So Babylon, they do exactly what Isaiah prophesied. Exactly the words in which God gave Isaiah were fulfilled. But there's something that takes place here because Babylon does come in, destroy the land, enslave the people. But Isaiah goes on and he lets God's people know that you're not going to be held in captivity forever. Why? Because God made a covenant with you, O Israel. Now thankfully, God holds to his covenant because he is perfect, pure, and holy, unlike man who breaks the covenant of God. But it is not up to God, thankfully. Up to man, thankfully. Woo! Whoa, that about slipped out wrong. But what was it that Isaiah was telling God's people? That there's going to be this Persian king by the name of Cyrus, a pagan, who is going to come and rescue you. He's going to crush Babylon and free God's people. But Isaiah goes on to tell them that when this time comes, when you're enslaved, do you know what you're going to do? You are still going to doubt the prophetic words of Isaiah. Even though that you know throughout your ancestors' past that every single prophecy that they were told came to by God, and yet here you are doubting his prophet. The very God who revealed himself to your ancestors, the very God who you received his commands, his laws, he's revealed himself to you, O southern kingdom. The only reason why you are in the southern kingdom is because of God. And yet you still reject him. But you know what you claim, O southern kingdom? You claim that your faith is in God, but your actions do not line up with your words. You say that your faith is in the true living God, but you know what you do? You're not worshiping him. You're bringing false idols into the land. And you say that you trust in the true living God's protection, but whenever you hear about an enemy closing in, you go to a foreign army and pay them. Your words and actions do not line up with your faith, O southern kingdom, which is why Babylon is coming. See, it's your doubt, it's your stubbornness, and it's your arrogance that is bringing God's discipline upon you. But once again, we see the grace and mercy of the true living God, where he never breaks his covenant. He fulfills his promise even though we disappoint him time and time again. We claim that our faith is in him, but our lives don't match up to it. We claim that we believe in the Holy of Holies, but our words don't match up to what we claim to believe. And yet he is still faithful. All right. Let's look at verse 6. I know what I said last week. So last week we were going to make it to verse 6. We didn't. But we are this week. Look at what it says here. You have heard. Now see all of this. And will you not declare it? From this time forth, I announce to you new things, hidden things that you have not known. O Southern Kingdom, here the prophet Isaiah is saying, open your eyes and your ears. Listen to the prophetic words of Isaiah. Listen, because they are going to be fulfilled. Place your faith in what he is saying and knowing that God is going to bring it to pass. For the very reason that you exist, O Southern Kingdom, as a nation, is because of God. But here's the thing, O people. It's not just good enough for you to say that you believe it. Your lives must line up with what you claim to believe. But you also must declare it. Declare it to one another. Declare it to the Gentiles that are surrounding you. Tell them about the true living God instead of bringing in their false gods to worship. Because you see these false gods that you keep bringing in, that you keep bowing down to, that you keep making sacrifices to, they have made absolutely no predictions. There's been no prophetic words that have come from their mouths because they can't. Now, what man can say is that this false god, this creature that they created by their own hands, made a prophetic word, said a prophetic word, and if they're lucky enough, it may even line up. But that false god did not decree nor prophesy a single thing. It's a lie. But the true living God, everything he has foretold has happened. And you can't, O people of God, be silent about that. And yet they are. That they keep rejecting this over and over. And this is what he's saying to them. Here's the thing, O Israel. Here's the thing. When you hear about this prophetic word from Isaiah, and you're thinking that you're going to be rescued, but you know what you're doing? You're limiting God because you're expecting another Moses, another believer to come and rescue you. This is the reason why you're doubting these very words. I'm telling you something new. There's going to be a pagan. Yes, God is going to use a pagan to rescue you. Never heard that before, have you? But you're not believing it because you think God is going to work in the same way over and over again. But you, oh man, are not God. You cannot limit what he is able to do. I mean, not only is this pagan God going to rescue you, he's going to conquer this mighty empire by the name of Babylon. God is not limited by his people or their expectation, nor by the world, nor by the universe. For God is self-sufficient. He doesn't need our permission for his plan to take place. For he functions by his will and his will alone. But God is going to do a new thing, not to mention the new information that he starts to bring about the Savior, something that they have never heard before. Now look at verse 7. It says, they are created now, not long ago. Before today, you have never heard of them. At least you should say, behold, I knew them. What's Isaiah saying to the southern kingdom who continues to reject God? Remember, all this is taking place before Babylon comes, before they're enslaved, before the pagan king comes to rescue them. He's putting the emphasis on this new prophetic word that is being laid out before them. And he's telling them, you cannot limit God with your finite human knowledge. You can try and figure this out as much as you want to, But there are certain things that your little, finite, fallen, sinful mind cannot comprehend. God works outside of time. We're limited by it. God is sinless. You are sinful. Look at verse 8. He goes on to say, you have never heard, you have never known. From of old your ear has not been opened. For I knew that you would surely deal treacherously, and that from before birth you were called a rebel. It's God saying to his people. The reason why I'm giving this information to you now is because I knew that you couldn't handle it any other time except for now. This is the only way in which you're going to see this play out. Why is that? Because I know your heart. I know who you truly are. Before you were even born, you were a rebel against me. I'm going to tell you what is going to take place in my perfect timing. Why? Because I know you, oh man. But they were not ready until this point to hear this new prophetic truth. Or if they would have heard it sooner, they still would have denied it. Which again is why Isaiah said, before birth you were called a rebel. Every little creature that is born into this world, and by creature I mean baby. Precious little things, right? Not in the eyes of God. They're rebels. He does call them a gift. He does call them a gift. But at the same time, sinners. Sinners being born into this world. He's also telling them there was never a time when I was speaking to your ancestors, O Israel, that I brought up this pagan king until now. That didn't happen. You hear this new information. There was never a time when I'm going to give you new revelation on this Savior until now. Couldn't grasp it. You could not handle it. It's always about God's perfect timing. And that's up to him. Not man, but God. Now look at verse 9. For my name's sake, I defer my anger. For the sake of my praise, I restrain it for you, that I may not cut you off. I want you to notice something here. Let me read this again. Look at who this verse is focusing on. For my name's sake, I defer my anger. For the sake of my praise, I restrain it for you, that I may not cut you off. Who's doing the work here? Why does God not destroy Israel for how they have treated him? I think if he did, there wouldn't be that many complaints. God was very patient with his people, and yet they kept rebelling. All the surrounding nations that worship those false gods would not blame the true living God of Israel for destroying his people. Why? Well, their gods had supposedly done that to them, so they would expect the true living God to do that to Israel. Of course, they didn't see him as the true living God. This is what God is doing here. One, he's holding his covenant, but he's showing the world that the God of Israel is different than all of those false gods. That you cannot compare the true living God to those made up false gods. There is something different about him. There is no comparison. Once again, does Israel, the southern kingdom, did they deserve God's wrath for what they have done? Yes. But the true living God of the southern kingdom is what? Full of grace and mercy. And God is going to deliver his wretched people so that the world will see the truth about the one and only God. that he is the God of deliverance. He is the only one who can save. Now just pause for a moment here. We're talking about Old Testament. We're talking about God going in and rescuing these heathens because of their rebellion against him. And yet he's saying, I'm the only one who can save. And he's actually talking about a physical salvation here, rescuing them from Babylon. But it also carries over for the believer's spiritual life. For one time, they were an unbeliever, and it is only God who can rescue the soul of that fallen creature. He is the only God who can deliver. It's the way it was in the Old Testament. It's the way it is in the New Testament. That's the way it always has been. He is the only way. Now, the question may be asked then, why did God take this plan of action? Why did he show them all this patience for this period of time? Then he brings up this wicked empire by the name of Babylon. They go in, destroy the land, enslave the people for 70 years. Well, why does he do it this way? Well, one, he's God. He can do whatever he wants to do. But we also have to look at human responsibility here, right? And this is something that we've said time and time again. When it comes to God's decree and man's responsibility, how does that work out? They're not enemy, they are friends. But God works in man's life. So what we're seeing here is when God had his people enslaved, what was he doing? Church, that's what we call discipline. He was bringing his children to obedience. This is how he was bringing them to obey, for them to be corrected. The same way in which a loving father disciplines his child to correct them, God does the same thing, except he does it perfectly. And listen, those surrounding lands, when they see the southern kingdom returning, they're going to be thinking, whoa, what just happened here? And they're going to ask the southern kingdom, how did you guys get back here? I mean, we saw the destruction take place. We heard that you all were enslaved, and now here you are? How? You start evangelizing right there. Let me tell you about the true living God and the grace and mercy that he has bestowed upon us. We don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. But here's the thing. If your faith is in him, he will redeem you. For they were delivered by way of his grace and mercy. And this is what God wants the world to see, to recognize about him. Verse 10, look what it says here. Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tried you in the furnace of affliction. That is an indie band name if I've ever heard of one. The Furnace of Affliction. They're from Seattle during the grunge phase. Not really, but should have been. Okay, so once again, notice that God, he destroyed the land of the southern kingdom, but he didn't destroy his people. He refined his people, not out of hate, but out of love. And we may even look at that experience that the southern kingdom went through, 70 years of enslavement. And you may even say that's just tragic, but it's not tragic, it is loving. This was evidence that God wasn't going to leave his own in an unrefined state. Now, he wasn't refining them for their value. For these suffering, this is God's will for his people, so that their faith might be purified and be shown as genuine. This is God doing the work in them using Babylon, the pagan empire. How did he do that? I don't know. He's God. But he was not going to leave his elect in the state of rebellion. If you are a believer in here today, he was not going to leave you, his elect, in the state of rebellion. That was never an option for you. God went against your free will because you wanted your sins, but that wasn't his plan for your life. Again, he was not going to leave his elect in a state of rebellion. He was going to draw them to himself through affliction. This was a sign of God caring for those he loves. Now, if you will, go to Hebrews chapter 12. We're going to look at this discipline thing for a second, okay? Because there may be a moment in your life when you feel like everything is just falling on top of you and crushing you, that God is punishing you, but it could be that God is disciplining you, bringing you closer to him, O child of God. You may be trying to rebel, and he's like, you can only get so far. You're not getting away from me. That's not even a possibility. But look at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5, and continuing. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Man, that's New Testament talk, talking about the Old Testament. And if you want to try me, okay, let's just go to Proverbs chapter 3. Look at verses 11 through 12. But my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. God is not going to let you, O sinner, continue in your sins. He will discipline you to refine you. And it may be painful during that moment, but it's because he loves you. I mean, it's not 70 years under Babylon, but still, it may be painful. But it's out of love in which he is doing this. The same way in which every loving father in here disciplines their child to correct them, to bring them to obedience. Look at verse 11. For my own sake. Now, anytime Isaiah repeats himself, that means this is extremely important. And I know what you're thinking. Well, no, duh. But anyway. For my own sake I do it. For how should my name be profaned? My glory I will not give to another. But what's God saying to the southern kingdom? I'm not going to let you compare me to those false idols that you have brought in to the land that I have given you. For I, God, I am perfect, pure, holy, and righteous. And because I am all of those things and many more, I'm also will never abandon my people. See, if God were to eliminate the very people that he made this covenant with, you know what the world would see? Their own false gods. Because they believe that's what their false gods would do. If you continue to disobey, their false gods would bring their wrath upon them and wipe them out. But God wasn't going to be compared to that lie. One, when God makes a promise or a covenant, he keeps it. No matter what fallen man may do, he keeps that promise. And why? Again, because he's holy and pure. But there's another reason for his glory to shine through the entire world. For all these other false gods are that of wrath. But this true living God of Israel, it's grace and mercy and compassion for his own. For his glory will shine when he delivers his people, even when his people and the world see it as impossible. But his own will come to recognize his glory because they are his. Look at verse 12. Listen to me, O Jacob and Israel, whom I called. I am he, I am the first, and I am the last. Now, we've seen this before, all the way back up to verse 1. If you'll go there. No, don't really. I'm just kidding. A bit of a long review. But so this takes place in verse 1. But let's look at the difference between verse 1 and here. In verse 1, Israel is being called out by God because they have failed to live by him. This time, God is saying, the reason you're called Jacob and Israel is because I've called you. I made you, Jacob. I made you, O Israel. You're not who you are because of what you've done. You are Jacob, you are Israel because of what I have done. What do you have to boast in, O Jacob, O Israel? Because I'm looking around the southern kingdom and I'm just seeing a bunch of false gods. I'm looking around the southern kingdom and I'm seeing a bunch of heathens acting in a manner in which I did not command them to act. He's saying, I brought you into existence. I made you my children. I did this because I am the only God. And since I am the one who called you, since I am the only one who can fulfill the prophetic words of Isaiah, don't you think it's best to listen to me? Isaiah is saying that God doesn't need man. For he is, I am he. I am the first. I am the last. He is self-sufficient. We have no idea what that is even like. The only reason why we are breathing right now is because God's grace upon us. The only reason we have a roof over our heads right now is because of God's grace upon us. The only reason why you have a home to go to, a job that you need to get up and go to, is because of God's grace upon you. We have no idea what it's like to be self-sufficient. Yet many of us think what? I got this. I can do this. Listen, the only reason why you wake up in the morning is because of God. And yet we forget that. God is telling his people, there is none like me. For the true living God has no limitations. For he is the first. And what does that mean? There was no one before him. That means there were no other gods. He is the first. He's also the last. What does that mean? That there is no one after him. That there are no gods after him. But he also controls everything in between, which means what? If there were gods, he created them, and he would have told man about them. But he didn't. For he is the only one. Oh, Israel, what are you doing? What are you doing? What life are you living right now? I've given you everything you need from me, and yet you continue to rebel. And for us today, what do we have? We have his complete word. Genesis to Revelation, we have it. And for some of us in here, we're still crying out for more. We have everything we need. But do we hold to it? I'm not saying perfectly. None of us are perfect. The only one who was perfect, we hung on a cross 2,000 years ago. But we have what we need from him. All right. Number 13. Again, proving that there are no other gods. My hand laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand spread out the heavens. When I call to them, they stand forth together. Everything that you see and can't see, O Southern Kingdom, I created it, meaning God. The very stars in which you sadly worship, some of you, I've created. They appear and disappear when I command them. Which is why you must get this through your thick skull, O Israel, that when I say I'm going to bring a pagan king to rescue you, that is what is exactly going to happen. I control the universe and everything that takes place in it. And yet you question that I can't bring a king to crush Babylon, the very Babylon that I'm going to bring up? You're questioning me that I can't rescue my own people when I spoke all of this to existence. What Isaiah is saying is it's a good thing that God is the covenant maker and holder and not you, O man. Sadly, for the church today, there are some within the body that claim to be believers, and yet their life does not reflect the Word of God, nowhere even close. We're seeing the sins of man play out over and over again, all the way from the old into the new. But for those stubborn people, there's still hope. There's still hope when their faith is placed in the Almighty Redeemer. For there is no sin that is too great for Him and Him alone. Place your faith in Him and all is forgiven. And no matter how often you rejected His commands, no matter how often you mocked His word, there is no sin too great for our mighty Savior. All right. Questions?